concerning the Seder of Yechidus, when Yechidus was and for who Yechidus was. So it's like this. Originally, there were 3 times a week that the Rebbe took for Yechidus: Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And this went on till Tovshin Chov Hei. Tovshin Chov Hei, it stopped, and the Rebbe took Yechidus only twice a week, which was Sunday and Thursday. There were times of the year when the Rebbe didn't take any Yechidus at all, like the month of Elul, and other times that the Rebbe did not have any Yechidus for a Meshach Zman. But otherwise, Yechidus first was 3 times a week, then it was 2 times a week. Now, Bochurim and Yugalite used to go in before the Yom Holedis. Also, Chasanim and Kalas and the Mechotonim would go in before a Chasana. Before the Chasana, the last Yechidus, more than a week before the Chasana, because during the week of the Chasana, the Chasana and Kala can't see each other, but anything before that, the last Yechidus before that, the Chasana and Kala would go in together. The parents of the Chasana would go in together, the mother and the father, and the parents of the Kala, the father and the mother, would go in Yechidus. And when the Chasana and Kala went in, sometimes what would happen is that the Kala would go out after the Rebbe finished giving them the brachas. The Chassan would stay in, hand the Rebbe his own settle, because he had his own personal inyonim and aveda or other things that he had, and give it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would read it and give a bracha, a sepel bracha, and answer the shaylas that this Chassan might have had or whatever he had. Originally also, not only after they were Chassan Kala and they were getting married, but even when they became Chassan Kala, they would go into Yechidus, which means basically when they would ask the Rebbe for a haskama to become a Chassan Kala. So the Chassan, the Bocher, would go on himself, the Kala would go on herself, the girl, and the Rebbe would give the haskama. That's how they would get their haskama and become Chassan Kala. So it was not only when they were Chassan Kala already, but before that they would go into Yechidus to get the haskama. Also, for Bar Mitzvah, there was a time to go into Yechidus. The family would go into Yechidus with the Bar Mitzvah Bocher. And the Rebbe would give brachas for the Bar Mitzvah. The Rebbe would usually ask the Bar Mitzvah Bocher concerning the Maimer that he's saying, also concerning the Pilpul. Sometimes he even ask him to say a little bit of the Maimer, sometimes a little bit of the Pilpul, might maybe ask questions. When I went into Yechidus before my Bar Mitzvah, which is in Ov, and this happened when we were in New York for Yud Beis Tammuz, so the Rebbe asked me about Maimer. He also asked me what my Pilpul is about, and I told him it's about Mitzvah Srichas Kavana or Mitzvah Ein Srichas Kavana. And the Rebbe asked me a few shaylas concerning that inyan. So this Bar Mitzvah time was another time that you were able to go into Yechidus. Even the woman, before she gave birth, would go into Yechidus to get a bracha from the Rebbe. And many times she would go in with her husband, sometimes herself. This is also a time that was set aside for people to go into Yechidus. Orchim, when they would come to the Rebbe, would go into Yechidus. If an Eirach came for a Yuchvat, Yutas Kislev, or any Yom de Pagre, afterwards he would go into Yechidus, which means that even if he came to the Rebbe 3 times a year would go into Yechidus. The Seder was, when you go to the Rebbe, you come to the Rebbe, you Rebbe Fabring, and then you go into Yechidus. But then later the Rebbe stopped it, and they were magbilit that you could only go in once a year. So a Neirach would come, he would only be able to go in once a year Yechidus at any time that he chose. The Seder was that if the Eirach who came had children, boys or girls, sons or daughters, learning in New York, would many times go into Yechidus with the parent or the parents that came for the Yom de Pagre, and they would go into Yechidus. I myself went to Yechidus with my father and sometimes my parents, even after I learned in New York already, because when they went in, the children also went in together with them. And then this stopped, the middle of the Lametz, Yechidus Proti stopped for Bochurim. Then later it stopped even for Yingelait. Then it even stopped for Orchim. Years later, it even stopped for Orchim. And instead of that, started Yechidus Klolius. That means that a few times a year, basically it was after Yom de Pagres, after Yuchvat, after Kislev, after Purim, I think, and after Pesach, whatever, after Yom de Pagres, special days, the Rebbe had Yechidus for, let's say, Chassan Kala. So all the people who were getting married, the Chassan Kala and the parents, the Mechotonim, would go into Yechidus. So the whole group of all the Chassan Kalas, from then till the next time will be Yechidus, would go into Yechidus Klolius. And also for Bar Mitzvah, there was a special Yechidus for Bar Mitzvahs, and there was special Yechidus for Orchim, which was also, and by the Yechidus, the Seder was that the Rebbe would say a Sikha, speak to all the people there, like all the Chassan Kalas and the Mechotonim, or all the Bar Mitzvah boys and the parents, all different Yechidus, all the Orchim, which would be the same night, but there would be different groups going in. The Seder would need, the Rebbe would speak, and after that, you would go by the Rebbe, give the Rebbe a zettel, like you would do at Yechidus, and the Rebbe would give out dalos to everybody who was there. And the Rebbe said that Yechidus Klolis, like I said before, is like Yechidus, and even more like than Yechidus because it has the mila of being together with a klal. But still, from our Hargoshe, we missed the Yechidus Proteus, even though Masad Rebbe's Hashpoas, it was still there. But from time to time, when you remind yourself, Niskorim, you remind yourself the feeling and the way it was step by step going to Yechidus, Nasim, you actually relive it and you feel it again. But it's not enough to just feel it. We're waiting for it to happen actually, which because of Mamish, we'll see the Rebbe again and we'll be able to go to Yechidus Protis again, and we'll have Fabrenges and we'll have all the Giluyim because of Mamish.